Stay tuned for a physical media review with your host, Grindle.
Hello, I'm Grindle, and welcome to another episode of Physical Media Review. This episode will be taking a look at Krusty Comics Issue 1. Before I start, I'd like to say that I absolutely adore Krusty the Clown on a spiritual level. It is perhaps because I can identify with him so strongly. He is, just like myself, an overweight, unfunny, alcoholic, aging comedian who is trying his best but so clearly past his prime. It is fantastic to see people like myself so thoroughly represented in the entertainment industry. And I believe we have largely Krusty the Clown to thank for that. So when I saw that Krusty the Clown had gotten his own comic, titled Krusty Comics, I just had to give it a look-see. As you can see, the front cover boasts a cash-strapped clown monkeying around with Mr. Teeny, who I love dearly also, and it features two terrific tales, The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land and Krusty and Mr. Teeny in Double Date. And on the bottom of the front cover, it mentions once again the rise and fall of Krusty Land, so I guess it's doubly important. And we're also told that this is the collector's edition, which I neither know nor care what it means. However, when we open the front cover, the disappointment begins to set in. We're told that this is actually The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land, Part 1, which starts to bite you with terror when you think, will Part 2 be included? And as you read through the comic, you find out that it is not Part 1 and 2 included, and you're left up in the air with a to be continued. I have nothing against to be continued, whatever the plural of that is, and I have nothing against comics being presented in Part 1 and Part 2. But the front cover says that it features two terrific tales, The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land and Krusty and Mr. Teeny in Double Date. But this is simply not true, because it doesn't have the entirety of The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land. It's only got half of it. In fact, the comic ends with Krusty Land having been built and it threatening to be destroyed. So, in truth, it should say that it only includes the rise of Krusty Land because it's blatant false advertising to claim that it has the fall of Krusty Land. My disappointment with only Part 1 being included aside, however, The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land, or The Rise of Krusty Land, has fantastic art and fantastic humour, although having only read Part 1, I can't exactly comment on the overall story. Moving on to Krusty and Mr. Teeny in Double Date, it's an enjoyable short story. I was admittedly a little bit let down by just how short and simplistic the story was, but I suppose it's supposed to be a B story, which I think I would have been fine with if it wasn't for the whole Part 1 and Part 2 debacle that I talked about earlier. So I'm not going to say Krusty and Mr. Teeny in Double Date is a bad story, just that it needed a stronger A story to really hit the mark as a good B story. The art style in Krusty and Mr. Teeny Double Date is also a lot more on model, where The Rise and Fall of Krusty Land had a far more interesting art style. Just like most Simpsons comics, Krusty Comics Issue 1 also includes a few little extras. We've got fan mail and fan art, which includes some fan art of Ren and Stimpy crossed over with Itchy and Scratchy, which is all very clever. And we've also got a short Sideshow Mel comic, and we've got, from Matt Groening himself, we have The Secret Origins of Krusty the Clown. Now, I do stress that these things are extra. They're not advertised on the front cover, so you can't be really too angry at the quality of them. However, I am, so I'm going to rant about it. This short Sideshow Mel comic, only being one page, is only Part 1. It's to be continued also. And to make matters worse, The Secret Origin of Krusty the Clown is also Part 1, ending with to be continued in Krusty Comics Part 2. This means that this short first issue of Krusty Comics includes no less than 3 to be continueds, which is a ludicrous amount. Most Simpson comics have largely standalone stories, and I'm not sure I've ever seen 3 to be continueds ever, except for comics that actually advertise that they're Part 1 and Part 2 on the cover. When it comes down to this issue, which could have been quite fantastic, felt in the end to be largely just an advertisement for Volume 2, which I suppose didn't end up working because this is a comic I bought when I was a child and I don't have Volume 2 yet. So overall, while I do enjoy what is in this, I don't suggest you read Krusty Comics Issue 1 unless you also have available to you Krusty Comics Issue 2, because you're going to be left up largely in the air, and 10 years later, you're probably going to make an angry YouTube video about it. Thanks for watching. I have been and still am Grindle.